Could you have cheated the Black Plague, the shocking survival secrets they tried to bury? Imagine this, 14th century Europe. A chilling shadow falls, darker than any night. The Black Death descends, not just one plague, but a terrifying trinity of horror, bubonic, septicemic, pneumonic. They didn't just kill, they erased civilizations, wiping out an estimated 60% of Europe. Let that sink in. Today, that's like 450 million people, just gone, vanished. We're about to unlock the forbidden knowledge, the survival secrets whispered only in the darkest corners, how you might have actually survived this medieval apocalypse. But hold up, before we plunge into the truly gruesome, stomach-churning details, do us a huge solid. Obliterate that subscribe button, activate all notifications, you won't want to miss what's next, and drop a comment below that'll echo through the annals of history. Now grab your plague mask, seriously don't skimp, maybe some thick gloves, and chug that emergency like your life depends on it. Because tonight, we're stepping back into the plague-infested lands. Sure, we boast iPhones, space travel, fancy tech now, but guess what? Viruses, our fragile human biology, deep down, they haven't changed that much. Sound eerily familiar? Just like pandemics we've known, rule number 1 to dodge the Black Death was terrifyingly simple. Abandon the crowds, forget bustling festivals, packed marketplaces, even sacred crowded churches became death traps. Why? The pneumonic plague, the lung shredder, traveled on invisible death droplets swirling in the air. Think airborne terror unleashed, the more people crammed together, coughing, sneezing, breathing the same poisoned air. Exponentially more chances for infected breath to find new lungs to conquer. Pure, unadulterated nightmare fuel. But wait, the horror deepens. The bubonic plague, the one with the infamous boils, had a different, arguably creepier delivery system. Flea bites. But these weren't your average pests. These were fleas hitching a deadly ride on infected mice and rats. The shadow companions of humanity. These plague-ridden rodents, crawling with billions of infected fleas, turned bustling cities into silent graveyards. Flea bites human, the clock starts ticking, game over. The truly terrifying twist, infected people often had no clue they were walking, talking disease vectors. Their bodies crawled with microscopic plague super fleas, monsters capable of leaping up to 2 meters, that's over 6 feet, onto a fresh, unsuspecting healthy victim. Staying more than 2 meters away from everyone, one incredibly slim chance you might have dodged the Black Death's grasp. Maybe the only real option was to lock yourself in, barricade the door, hoard supplies, and pray. Hey, might as well binge read the entire Bible while you're waiting for the apocalypse to pass. Seal it up. Italy, a peninsula surrounded by water, had countless vulnerable ports, countless open doors for the plague to creep ashore. When the Black Death finally slammed into Milan, their leader, a notoriously ruthless strongman named Visconti, enacted a plan of brutal efficiency. He ordered the houses of the first victims boarded up, completely sealed, locking everyone inside, sick, healthy, children, elderly, it didn't matter. They became living tombs, diseased coffins trapping entire families in a slow, agonizing demise. Extreme, horrifying beyond words, absolutely. But Milan's final death toll, a shockingly low 15%, by far the lowest of any major Italian city. They made horrifying, unthinkable sacrifices, yes. Countless innocent lives extinguished, social gatherings ceased, even grim necessities like scavenging through the belongings of the freshly dead, a truly ghastly thought, became too risky. Speaking of Italy, forget the comforting, yummy lasagna you know and love. One Florentine writer, Boccaccio, painted a truly stomach-churning, unforgettable picture of the plague streets. Mass graves weren't just pits dug in haste, they were meticulously layered. Bodies piled high, a thin layer of dirt, more bodies, more dirt. Like a grotesque, hellish nightmare lasagna, just touching the dead, even accidentally, could instantly make you the next gruesome layer. People were so paralyzed by terror, they abandoned their own dead loved ones' corpses in the streets, unburied, unmourned. No Game of Thrones back then to teach the vital lesson. Burn the dead. As the body count skyrocketed, rotting corpses piled up in alleyways and squares. Out of this chaos, a strange, grim group emerged. The Becchini, no relation to the swimsuit, thankfully. These were lower-class men, often already infected themselves and immune or resigned to their fate, tasked with the horrific job of dragging corpses out of the cities. Predictably, some turned to robbery, even murder, preying on the dead and dying. But who else would dare touch those mountains of highly infectious corpses? Italy, desperate, just sort of had to deal with it. The Becchini cleared the streets, a necessary evil, while the wealthy elite grabbed their diamonds and furs and fled the plague-ridden hellscapes. But fire, yes, fire, they did consider fire's strange, purifying, almost mystical power. And here's one shocking survivor story you won't believe. Pope Clement IV, residing in Avignon, a city ravaged by the plague where a staggering 1/3 of his cardinals died, the Pope himself remained untouched. His bizarre secret weapon, his doctors advised him to sit constantly between two massive bonfires, essentially living inside a ring of fire, and incredibly it worked. He never got sick. Did the plague-carrying rats see the roaring flames around this well-fed potential victim and just nope right out, searching for less flammable targets? Did even desperate humans think twice before braving a wall of fire just for a chat with the Pope? We may never know the exact reason, but the fiery prescription seemed to grant immunity. Fast forward to 1666, the ominous Devil's Year. The Great Fire of London decimated the city. But in doing so, it also accidentally incinerated countless hordes of plague-carrying rats and fleas. Was it a divine, if destructive, intervention? An accidental city-wide plague cure? You decide. Now let's briefly address those iconic, utterly creepy plague doctor outfits with the beak masks. They look terrifying, but make almost zero practical sense, right? Their understanding of contagion, of germs and viruses, was tragically primitive, almost non-existent compared to our modern knowledge. The famous Italian author Giovanni Boccaccio, whose accounts provide so much chilling detail, lamented how physicians were utterly clueless, woefully unprepared for the plague's onslaught due to sheer, crippling ignorance. Shockingly, it's likely that early physicians, lacking proper protection or understanding of contamination, inadvertently became super spreaders of the disease themselves. Their ignorance wasn't just bliss, it was catastrophically deadly. Could you have navigated this terrifying labyrinth of death, desperation, and bizarre survival tactics? What would your plan have been? Let us know your ultimate Black Plague survival strategy in the comments below. But wait, amidst the chaos, a figure emerges from the miasma. The plague doctor arrives. After agonizing years battling this invisible, relentless enemy, physicians finally conceived the most iconic and frankly terrifying uniform in medical history. And let's be brutally honest, it looks terrifyingly cool, ripped straight from a collective nightmare or a dark fantasy novel. First rocked, believe it or not, by the trend-setting Dr. Charles Delorme in France, this late-century fashion statement wasn't just clothing, it was armor against death itself. It included a long, heavy, often waxed overcoat, a wide-brimmed hat signifying his profession, thick gloves, sturdy boots, and of course, that mask, the unforgettable, terrifying, pointed bird-like beak mask. But why the bizarre beak? Doctors clung to the flawed theory of miasma, the belief that disease, the plague itself, spread through foul, corrupted, stinking air. So the logic went, if you breathed in pleasant smells, you'd be protected. They stuffed the long beak with potent sweet-smelling concoctions, like dried rose petals, mint leaves, camphor, cloves, and other spices, essentially a primitive wearable air freshener against airborne death. Did this aromatic defense actually work against the plague bacteria? Almost certainly not. However, the head-to-toe waxed leather outfit probably did offer some real protection by preventing flea bites, blocking the primary vector for bubonic plague. That, or maybe the plague-infested fleas were justifiably terrified of these giant, creepy, spice-scented birdmen roaming the desolate streets. Staying alive during the Black Death was a grim, desperate lottery. But one group you definitely wanted to steer clear of, the flagellants. Who were these terrifying figures? Imagine religious zealots cranked up to 11, utterly convinced the plague was God's direct punishment for humanity's rampant sins. Their extreme solution, publicly whipping themselves, and sometimes others, into a bloody, ecstatic frenzy, hoping their suffering would appease divine wrath and halt the pestilence. Talk about intense public displays. The Black Death was, perversely, their time to shine. They marched in long processions from town to town, chanting, praying, and putting on horrifying spectacles of self-mutilation that drew morbid crowds. The fatal problem? Despite the public shaming, the pain, and the copious bleeding, it offered zero immunity. In fact, these wandering bands of fanatics, moving freely between infected and uninfected areas, likely became potent vectors themselves, inadvertently spreading the plague further and faster wherever they landed. Not exactly helpful in a pandemic. So if self-flagellation was out, what did desperate communities try? Think bubble cities. Some places attempted the ultimate lockdown, sealing themselves off completely from the outside world. Armed guards, often ruthless mercenaries, patrolled city gates day and night, ready to deny entry to anyone showing the slightest hint of sickness. Even a suspicious cough or a mild fever could be a death sentence at the gates. Brutal? Absolutely. It aimed to keep the plague out, but it also cruelly trapped anyone already infected inside, condemning them alongside the healthy. Beyond land borders, the ports got deadly serious. Ships arriving from known plague-ridden areas, especially the east where the nightmare began, were flat-out turned away or forced into long, isolated waiting periods offshore. Venice, the wealthy trading superpower, got particularly smart, or perhaps just ruthlessly pragmatic, by 1348. They pioneered a mandatory 30-day isolation period for suspect travelers and their goods, essentially inventing the concept, "Go hang out over there on that island, don't talk to anyone, and we'll see if you drop dead." Later, realizing 30 days wasn't always enough, they upped it to 40 days. In Italian, 40 is quaranta. Sound familiar? Boom, the chilling birth of the word and practice of quarantine. These drastic measures undoubtedly slowed the relentless spread, but the plague was a wildfire. Even fortified Venice still lost tens upon tens of thousands of souls. Maybe they needed something even more extreme. Plague law, forget warnings. We're talking full-blown martial law, medieval style. No ships allowed in ports, period. Homes of the sick immediately sealed tight, becoming inescapable tombs. Remember Milan's brutal success? Strict, unforgiving curfews enforced by armed patrols. Cities like Pistoia in northern Italy, landlocked and unable to simply close down ports, went into total lockdown overdrive, imposing massive restrictions on all imports, exports, any form of travel, shutting down bustling markets, even heavily regulating grim funerals to prevent further spread. The heartbreaking result, despite these draconian measures, Pistoia still lost a jaw-dropping, almost unimaginable 70% of its entire population, with mortality rates hitting a terrifying 80% or more in some devastated regions. Who could truly blame desperate authorities for trying absolutely anything, no matter how harsh? It's easy to get lost in the horrifying statistics, the sheer scale of death, but remember this crucial fact. Some people did catch the plague during this nightmare era and miraculously survived. It wasn't due to folk magic, not because they bizarrely tied live chickens to their oozing plague boils. Yes, people actually tried that. Or because they drank refreshing glasses of chilled arsenic. Seriously, do not try that at home. So how did these few lucky souls really beat the impossible odds? What was their secret? That, perhaps, is a terrifying secret best left buried. Or maybe, just maybe, it was nothing more than sheer, unpredictable dumb luck. But how did some people just walk away? Was it divine intervention or something coded deep within their very being? Turns out, some survivors weren't just lucky. Their bodies were natural-born plague fighters. Forget keto or CrossFit. We're talking basic, fundamental health. Research even back then, and confirmed now, showed a brutal truth. If you were already unhealthy, malnourished, suffering other illnesses, maybe even just rotting teeth, your odds of surviving the plague plummeted. A weakened immune system was practically an invitation for Yersinia pestis to crash the party. Healthy people, they weren't magically immune, they could still get infected, but their bodies simply had a better chance of fighting back. So maybe listen to your yogi sometimes, start those juice cleanses, maybe. But here's a weird twist. Forget hot yoga, embrace the cold. Your chances of survival actually increased in the winter. Unlike modern flu bugs that thrive in winter, the Black Plague bacteria hated the cold. It flourished, exploded, went on rampages during the warmer spring and summer months. Winter, the plague practically vanished, like Brenda calling in sick with flu in July. Super suspicious, right? So, maybe the ultimate survival hack was moving north, pack up the kids, head to icy Norway. Well, about that, the plague, ever the adaptable monster, eventually evolved, deciding, hey, maybe I do like cold weather after all, losers. It spread everywhere, including freezing Norway, which suffered a staggering 30 plague outbreaks between 1348 and 1654, though interestingly none seemed to hit during the absolute dead of winter. The plague just loves keeping us guessing, doesn't it? Did medieval folks ever wonder about being born immune? Because plot twist, genetic immunity was real. Forget ageless skin or crystal blue eyes. Imagine winning the genetic lottery with immunity to a disease boasting an 80% kill rate. Researchers have found specific gene clusters, particularly noted among the Roma people, that offered significant protection. Not complete immunity, mind you. They could still get sick, but certain genetic variations triggered a much stronger, faster immune response specifically against Yersinia pestis, the bacterial supervillain wiping out continents. Talk about lucky genes. Now let's revisit those medieval beliefs. They were convinced of two big things, both demonstrably wrong. 1. that the thick, gag-inducing stench of sickness hanging in the air, the miasma, was the disease itself. Nope, while the pneumonic plague was airborne, the bacteria itself doesn't technically smell. 2. This was all happening because God was absolutely furious about rampant sin. And hey, no TV, no internet. How boring was 1328? Of course, there was sin, but blaming divine anger missed the microscopic killer entirely. They lacked the books, the research, the germ theory we have now, thanks in part to lessons learned the hard way back then. So can we forgive them for desperately avoiding foul air and clutching extra rosary beads? Probably. And if that didn't work? My absolute favorite survival tip, courtesy of our old pal Boccaccio, the screw it philosophy. He noted some Florentines just gave up on caution. They vowed to carouse and make merry, going out singing, frolicking, drinking, eating, satisfying every possible appetite. Europe was being decimated. 1 in 3 people dropping dead from this agonizing, misunderstood disease. Thousands tried everything, isolation, herbs, prayers, fleeing, and still got it. So some just wised up. They hit the taverns, they danced, they drank, they ate, they lived their dang lives to the absolute fullest, knowing this invisible killer was likely unavoidable anyway. And honestly, what was the life expectancy in 1400? Maybe 30 if you were lucky, so they said, screw it. And you know what? Boccaccio noted they died just as often as those who practiced moderation. A grim toast to you, 1300s Europe. You walked through hell so we could run to get antibiotics. Yes, you can still get the plague today, believe it or not. But thankfully, it's now usually cured easily with antibiotics. A miracle invention we can never fully appreciate, having never faced the choice of moving to Norway or sitting in a ring of fire. So the ultimate question remains, do you think you would have survived the Black Death? What's your master plan? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're pondering your medieval fate, check out some of these other bizarre tales from weird history from the world.